parking spot, a seemingly trivial matter, almost led to a tragedy. Ever since the upstairs neighbor bought a car, the downstairs resident had to meticulously maneuver his motorcycle out of their shared courtyard. One day, he accidentally scratched the car, igniting a heated argument that quickly escalated into a physical fight. Today, we're diving into Parking, an Indian film that explores the complexities of shared living spaces and the unexpected ways in which minor inconveniences can spiral into life-altering conflicts. The film opens with Eeshwar and his pregnant wife, Athika, relocating to a new city for work. They find a charming two-story apartment with a courtyard. On the first day of moving in, they enthusiastically visited the tenants on the first floor. A young girl opened the door and warmly invited them in. Her father, Ilam, was repairing an old radio, and it was evident that they were living frugally. Ilam worked in a government department and was set to retire next year. He mentioned that he always adhered to a principle of saving wherever possible, which earned Ishvar's respect. However, Ilam's wife considered him a penny pincher as he was unwilling to replace their broken furniture and appliances. One day, Ilam's nephew approaches him, seeking to secure a contract for a public restroom renovation project. A single word from Ilam would guarantee his nephew the contract. Yet, Ilam remained steadfast in his principles, awarding the project to a different bidder who submitted a more competitive proposal. Over the following month, a heartwarming camaraderie blossoms between the two families. Ishvar's wife is 6 months pregnant, and today marks another prenatal checkup. After a frustrating wait for a taxi, they resign themselves to hailing a three-wheeler. The rickety vehicle bounces precariously along the pothole-ridden roads, filling Ishvar with anxiety. He urges the driver to exercise caution, his concern for his wife and unborn child paramount. At the hospital, the doctor emphasizes the importance of avoiding strenuous activity to safeguard the pregnancy. On their way back, Eeshwar and Athika decide to buy a car. Upon their return, Ilam catches his first glimpse of the car, a fleeting moment of shared joy. However, his smile soon fades as the reality of their shared courtyard sets in. With only one parking space, maneuvering his motorcycle becomes a Herculean task. One evening, Ishvar's car is parked carelessly, blocking Ilam's access entirely. Left with no other choice, Ilam calls upon Eeshwar to move his vehicle, a minor inconvenience that chips away at his patience. What was once a routine act is now a daily source of frustration, casting a pall over Ilam's days. To add insult to injury, a young man enters the courtyard one day, making a beeline for the second floor. Ilam inquires about his purpose, but the man ignores him completely. It dawns on Ilam that he has been mistaken for the gardener, a humiliating blow to his pride. A respected government official, accustomed to deference and esteem, finds himself misjudged and disregarded, leaving him deeply unsettled. A few days later, Ilam returned home as usual. Unfortunately, he scraped Ishvar's car while parking his motorcycle, but he didn't notice the mishap. The next day, Eeshwar discovered a scratch on his car. Ilam, upon seeing the damage, expressed regret and cautioned Eeshwar to be more careful when parking. Eeshwar, however, had inspected his car the previous night and found no such scratch, leading him to suspect Ilam's involvement. Ilam, offended by the implication, retorted, "It's just a small scratch. Why wouldn't I own up to it?" However, before he could finish his sentence, Eeshwar noticed paint marks on Ilam's motorcycle, exposing the truth. Embarrassed, Ilam quickly explained that it was too dark the previous night, and he must have accidentally scratched the car. He offered to pay for the repairs, but Eeshwar, choosing to be magnanimous, brushed it off, simply asking Ilam to be more careful in the future. Ilam, however, couldn't let it go. He compared his daily struggle to navigate his motorcycle in the cramped space to escaping from a cage, complaining that Eeshwar left him with barely enough room to breathe. "But the space is limited," Eeshwar argued. "Should I park my new car outside?" Their debate raged on, leaving both men fuming. Another morning arrived, and Eeshwar's car was parked even more outrageously, making it nearly impossible for anyone, let alone a motorcycle, to pass. Ilam, exasperated, questioned the car washer about the car's parking job. The young man, however, ignored him completely. This was the last straw for Ilam. Furious, He stormed upstairs and banged on Ishvar's door, demanding he come down immediately and move his car. His tone, fueled by anger, was anything but polite. Ishvar, still having breakfast, asked for 2 minutes, but Ilam refused to budge, insisting he come down that instant. This ignited Ishvar's temper. He slammed the door shut, finished his breakfast leisurely, and came down to find Ilam already gone, a testament to his fury. Even after a long day at work, Ilam's anger hadn't subsided. Seeing that Ishvar's car was still not back, he parked his motorcycle squarely in the middle of the courtyard. The next morning, Ilam woke to the sight of his motorcycle lying on the ground, sending him into a rage. He barged into Ishvar's apartment, waking him up with a torrent of accusations. Ishvar, caught completely off guard, found himself unable to offer a reasonable explanation. Another heated argument ensued, prompting them to call the landlord to intervene. Ilam, having rented the apartment for 10 years, assumed the landlord would side with him. He demanded Ishvar park his car outside. The landlord, however, refused his unreasonable request. Ishvar paid higher rent, and the parking space was intended for a car. This infuriated Ilam, who, in a fit of pique, decided to buy a car, a more expensive one than Ishvar's, in full cash. Soon, Ilam returned, his brand new car gleaming in the courtyard. Ilam's wife was flabbergasted by his irrationality, and the vendors outside their house were equally surprised, gossiping about how the notorious penny pincher had finally splurged. Ishvar, left with no other choice, started parking his car outside. However, the fallen leaves and dust soiled his car, forcing him to make a decision. He began leaving work early to secure the parking spot. And so began their daily battle for the coveted parking space. The battle for the parking spot took an absurd turn when Ishvar resorted to taking taxis to work every day, just to deny Ilam any opportunity to park his car. Ilam racked his brain and finally came up with a clever plan. He broke the submersible pump and called someone to fix it, knowing that the well was right under the parking spot. Ishvar had no choice but to move his car. He waited for the repairs to be completed, but hours passed with no sign of progress. He decided to leave. As soon as he drove away, the pump was miraculously fixed. Just as Ilam was about to claim his victory, Eeshwar, in a surprising display of driving skills, swooped in and snatched the parking spot. "You call that driving? You're out of your league, old man," he gloated. His triumph was short-lived. A rock came hurtling towards his car. Eeshwar, his pride wounded, retaliated in full view of their neighbors, slapping Ilam across the face. The slap was a blow to Ilam's dignity, humiliating him in front of his community. He pointed a trembling finger at Eeshwar, vowing revenge. True to his word, Ilam's retaliation was swift and devastating. A few days later, Eeshwar found himself dragged to the police station, accused of molesting Ilam's daughter. It was an unthinkable accusation, a father using his own daughter's honor for revenge. Ilam, however, played the part of the aggrieved father to perfection. Eeshwar was thrown in jail. His distraught wife pleaded with Ilam, begging him to drop the charges. For a moment, Ilam felt a flicker of guilt. However, when Eeshwar's colleagues threatened to report Ilam's actions to his workplace, his remorse vanished. He chased them away, his anger reignited. Meanwhile, Ilam's daughter was inconsolable. Under duress from her father, she had falsely accused Eeshwar. The sight of Eeshwar's wife begging for mercy filled her with shame. Early the next morning, she went to the police station and withdrew her statement. The dark cloud of this conflict, however, refused to dissipate. Instead, it awakened a vengeful spirit in Eeshwar. He began stalking Ilam, following him to work, his own job forgotten, his mind consumed by thoughts of retribution. Finally, he devised a plan. He went to Ilam's office. Ilam, assuming Eeshwar was there to apologize, prepared to deliver a self-righteous lecture. Instead, Eeshwar simply smiled and left. Ilam watched him go, puzzled and uneasy. As Ilam pondered, he suddenly noticed an envelope in the trash can. Opening it, he understood everything. It was a trap set by Eeshwar. Just as Ilam was about to leave, the disciplinary department arrived. Ilam, who had resisted countless temptations over the years, now faced the risk of ruining his reputation. The inspectors searched Ilam but found nothing. It turned out that Ilam had hidden the money in the ceiling fan blades, breaking into a cold sweat. The inspectors asked an assistant to turn on the fan, but the assistant replied that the area's electrical circuit was under repair and wouldn't be restored until 4 p.m. Ilam thought, "Oh my God, this is too scary. There's only 20 minutes left until the power comes back." He then noticed that the fan switch was still on, which could have been disastrous. Luckily, he quickly turned it off while pretending to drink water. After a thorough inspection, Ilam's suspicion was finally cleared. Just as the inspectors were about to leave, the power came back on. The diligent assistant turned on the fan, and the money on the fan blades was instantly exposed. Ilam's years of a clean reputation were shattered in an instant. Retirement, he knew, was out of the question. Avoiding jail was the best he could hope for. The more Ilam thought about it, the angrier he became. Late at night, he grabbed a wrench and started loosening the bolts on Eeshwar's car tires. "You disrespect the elderly, huh? Slap me in the face, huh? Make me lose my job, huh? Make me lose my pension, huh?" The next morning, Ilam peered out his window. To his surprise, it was another one of Athika's prenatal checkup days. "I never meant to harm his wife," Ilam thought. Meanwhile, Eeshwar was driving Athika to the hospital. Athika had learned about Eeshwar's scheme to frame Ilam and was furious. She urged him to move, to end this feud before it escalated further. Eeshwar agreed. Just then, the car skidded, careening out of control. Thankfully, they survived, Athika escaping with just a fright. Later, the insurance company informed Eeshwar that the accident was most likely a deliberate act of sabotage. His mind flashed back to the previous night, and he was convinced that Ilam was responsible. Enraged, Eeshwar grabbed a wooden plank and smashed Ilam's car windows. He poked his finger in Ilam's face, calling him a murderer. Ilam, equally furious, rushed inside, grabbing the phone to call his nephew and threaten Eeshwar. His wife intervened, wrestling the phone away. Even she could see the absurdity of his actions. Ilam, however, remained unrepentant. He turned on his daughter, blaming her for withdrawing her statement, claiming that none of this would have happened if she hadn't interfered. His stubbornness and irrationality were too much for his wife and daughter to bear. They decided to leave, abandoning the old man to his bitterness. Upstairs, a similar scene unfolded. Eeshwar's wife, disgusted by his actions, kicked him out. Eeshwar sought solace in a bottle, drowning his sorrows at a local bar. As the sky unleashed a torrential downpour, Athika tried to close the window but slipped, collapsing in pain, unable to move. She tried to reach for her phone to call Eeshwar, but it was out of reach. Eeshwar, meanwhile, as he reached his apartment building, he paused. In a moment of drunken recklessness, he decided to confront Ilam one last time. He pounded on Ilam's door and barged in, his words fueled by alcohol. He announced that he was moving in 2 days, not out of fear, but for his wife's sake. He warned Ilam not to try anything stupid during those 2 days, or face the consequences. He spoke without pause, oblivious to Ilam's reaction. Suddenly, as Eeshwar lay unconscious, Ilam began dragging his body towards the kitchen. Meanwhile, Athika managed to crawl to the table and grab the phone. Ilam saw the incoming call and wanted to hang up but accidentally answered it, hearing a woman in pain and the breaking of her water, urging him to come back quickly. Ilam guessed it was Athika, but he was in the middle of trying to kill her husband. What should he do? The devil and angel battled in his mind, and he ultimately decided to go upstairs and check. After what seemed like an eternity, Ilam returned. Upon entering, he didn't see Eeshwar and was puzzled. Suddenly, Eeshwar appeared behind him and knocked him out with a wrench. He then turned on the gas valve and threw Ilam's phone into the microwave. After setting everything up, Eeshwar locked the door, ensuring Ilam couldn't escape even if he woke up. He then staggered back home, only to find his wife missing. He wanted to call her, but his phone was still at Ilam's place. Desperate, he ran downstairs and borrowed a phone from a passerby to call his wife, but a nurse answered. It turned out that Ilam had found Athika unconscious and rushed her to the hospital, pretending to be her father to ensure she and the baby received immediate care. Realizing his grave mistake, Eeshwar knew he was about to kill his wife's savior. He frantically ran to rescue him. He desperately pounded on the door and tried to break it down, but to no avail. It seemed fate was determined to drag their feud into the grave. Fortunately, in a moment of clarity, Eeshwar turned off the main power switch, averting a catastrophe. In the end, Athika and her family were happily reunited, and Ilam was fine. Eeshwar sincerely apologized to Ilam, who also let go of his resentment. After experiencing so much, Ilam realized it was foolish for a nearly 60-year-old man to hold such a grudge against a young man. Thus, the two reconciled. Finally, Ilam moves to his village with his wife and daughter, while Eeshwar and his family also leave the apartment building. The parking spot that had been the source of so much conflict is left empty, a silent reminder of the destructive power of hatred and the redemptive power of forgiveness. This is the Indian film Parking. It's a unique and thought-provoking story, a testament to how a simple parking dispute can spiral into violence and chaos.